Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Hope you're having a wonderful day, and welcome back for today's daily lesson for pre-calculus. Okay, today just continuing on from what we were talking about the last two lessons about sine and cosine graphs. Today we're actually learning our first thing about the two, other than the properties. Today we're just going to talk about the amplitude of a sine and cosine function. So to get started. The amplitude of a sine and cosine function is half the distance between the maximum and minimum values of the function. Or, to put it simply, just half the height of the wave. Okay? And let's see how the paper, but we're going to go over what that, I guess, how those will look here in a second. But let's go more about the functions. Now, the general function you're going to get for sine and cosine graphs is these two functions right here. Y is equal to a times sine of bx plus c all plus d. Now, each one of these terms in this function, a, b, c, and d, for both of them, sine and cosine, they all have a special thing that they affect, whether it's amplitude, periods, and things of that nature. They all affect something. But for amplitude, it's simply always going to be the a value, whatever's in front of sine and cosine, okay? So amplitude is always going to equal to the absolute value of a. Now that, why we say the absolute value is because you don't really care what is negative or is positive. You just want to take the maximum value of it, which is always the absolute value. Okay, so that's what we're doing from there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go over how to identify the amplitude of the functions, and then we're going to see how it looks when you graph it. So we have our first one, f of x. The amplitude for sine of x, since there's nothing in front of sine, the amplitude is essentially equal to 1, right? And that's why it has a height of 1. And when we graph it, once again, sine functions start at 0, 0. At pi over 2, they go up and hit 1. At pi, they go back to 0. At 3 pi over 2, they go to negative 1. And at 2 pi, they go back to 0. So it should look something like this. Okay, big old wave. Okay, and this is essentially f of x function. Now, for g of x, okay, for g of x we have 1/2 is times sine of x. So the amplitude for g of x would be 1/2. And so that's our height. So that means instead of going to 1, we're going to go to 1/2 or 0.5. So at 0, it's still 0, 0. At pi over 2, it goes to its amplitude. So it goes to 0.5. And it goes back down to 0. And at 3 pi over 2, it goes the opposite direction. So it goes to negative 0.5. And at 2 pi, it goes back down to 0 once again. So it should look something like this. This is g of x. So you can see how they're very similar, but the amplitude just is going to affect how that shrinks or expands or shrinks, I guess how we'll say it, okay? That's about it. So let's look at a cosine graph and how that affects it. And just so you know, it's pretty much the exact same thing. There's not really much of a change in how they look. So once again, we'll do the same thing. For cosine x, since there's nothing in front of cosine, amplitude is essentially equal to 1. Okay, and it's just the absolute value, so it doesn't really matter. So to kind of see that, we'll make this negative 2 cosine x, and we'll kind of see what that does to it. So I graph it once again. So remember, for cosine x, it doesn't start at 0. It starts at its amplitude. So cosine x starts at 1. So that's a positive 1, not negative. So at 1, it's at 0, 0, 1. Then at pi over 2, it goes to 0. At pi, it goes down all the way to negative 1. 3 pi over 2 goes back to 0. And at 2 pi, it goes back to its amplitude of 1. So it should look something like this, okay? This is f of x. So now we're going to go look at g of x now. So now we have a function that says negative 2 times cosine x. So once again, we don't really care for this negative value. So we'll take the absolute value of it, okay? Because if I take the absolute value of it, it's just going to give us the exact same thing. So it's going to give us a value of 2. So A is equal to 2. So that's our height, okay? So that means that 0, 1, it should start up right here at 2. Then I go back down to 0 at pi over 2. Then at pi, it goes down to negative 2. 3 pi over 2 goes to 0. And 2 pi goes all the way back up to 2. So just following the same pattern as it typically does. This is going to be g of x. And that's all amplitude really is. All you care for is whatever this value is. This value in front of cosine or sine. Okay, that's what gives you your amplitude, and that just affects your height. Okay, that's it. That's it for today's daily lesson. I hope everyone's having a great day or a great kind of everything that's going on right now, guys. I know it's kind of scary. I know it's really difficult, especially for you seniors. But just keep trucking along, and you'll make it through it. I promise you. Things always work out somehow way in the end. Okay, and just never get down. Okay, my servers are always open for y'all if y'all need to talk or if you have any questions. Okay, have a great day. Peace.